Our first story deals with a subculture of heavy metal music that some feel is sending a dangerous message to your kids.
The forces of evil on the dark side of devil rock.
And I want to talk tonight about the devil and demons and witches and wizards.
And we just mix it up with hardcore and aggression and come out with something we think's an original sound.
Loud, fast, heavy, you know.
Well, what do you got?
What do you got?
Welcome back to another episode of Riff Worship, the podcast that continues to ask, what's a riff, how's a riff, when's a riff? And we are joined again by my two co-hosts, Austin Paulson, Chicago's very own son next to Pepsi Phil, and the oldest man on the planet, Justin Swindle. How you guys doing?
I'm worried. Swindle is looking older and older each day with each passing
Is that an
day.
Eddie mask?
It's just a zombie mask.
It's Eddie.
It's
I went to a Halloween party dressed as a character from Zombie Nightmare, which we watched this year, which is a zombie baseball player, but he literally is just wearing a sweatshirt and sweatpants and has a baseball bat.
Daryl Strawberry?
For copyright rules, that's a Freddy mask. Boo. Boo. Oh, what? I didn't know we had props.
Oh my god!
Fucking
I just got this cool bulldog thing.
Y'all are the carrot top of guitar based podcast
world.
discussion commentary type talk shows.
So this is a really special episode. This is something we all have talked about since the beginning. This is something that we're all big fans of. That being Halloween, horror movies, the general spooky time of year. I think we all see the, September coming down and we start digging into, different types of music that kind of fill the autumn air. And this is going to be no different. This is going to be a podcast kind of touching on all of those subjects, horror, heavy music that's in the vein of what we think of when we enter this time of year. So this will drop on Halloween. This is a special episode of the Riff Worship Podcast.
Happy Halloween, everybody.
Happy Halloween.
It really is it's a celebration of the last gasp before seasonal
Celebration.
the last gasp before seasonal affective disorder. Before the time changes and it gets dark at 4 p.m., we get one last chance at happiness by celebrating Halloween.
You guys aren't. If you are even up here for a second during the cold season, I don't want to hear nothing. It's like Alaska up here. It's like 30 days of night to tie it into Halloween. It's just,
that's perfect.
Yeah, but it's bleak. It's a bleak time after Halloween.
Well, then that'll kind of segue into what I'm going to ask. What does Halloween and horror mean to each of you? What's the connection there? What's your first memory of like connecting those two things together as probably young kids? That's when I know I got into like the whole like horror movies around Halloween, that sort of thing. What were each of your first connections?
I think it's pretty synonymous with music in a lot of ways, because it feels like, I think if you look at, especially a lot of the records we've talked about and a lot of the horror movies we'll probably get into today, they're kind of akin to one another in that there's definitely a lot of heavy metal that's been influenced by horror. There's a lot of horror that's been influenced by heavy metal, but it almost feels like a kind of counterculture thing. Like it feels like you're being a part of some sort of thing that isn't traditional, or maybe something that you're not supposed to be into, or at least like not like nerd out about like we do on these types of shows. But yeah, there's just maybe an aesthetic. There's like there's always just something odd or something that like has always drawn me to horror or like sci-fi and stuff like that. And then to have like almost a day or like a whole month where you kind of get to dive into those types of things where, I mean, I don't know. I mean, if we're being honest, we probably watch a lot of this shit throughout the year anyway.
Oh, yeah.
But for it to be a month where it's kind of celebrated, or a day where it's celebrated, it really just kind of brings out everything in me. I don't know. With Swindle, is there like a first moment when you realized you were a freak?
Uh, it happened as an adult. Without like getting too much into it, like both of my parents kind of hold a weird belief about Halloween and Christianity. So like I definitely got to an age, probably like 12 or 13, and my dad was like, "Okay, you're literally done with Halloween. Like you're a teenager now." So I was like, "Okay, well, I guess I'm done with Halloween." But then as an adult, like it kind of is like the fun holiday because it is a time for people to be fucking weirdos, and we are all unabashedly weirdos. Like,
I mean, look
that's
at
just
me.
not even debatable. Yeah,
Dylan,
old the hills have eyes over here.
Dylan literally has a Vlad the Impaler sleeve. Like,
yeah, absolutely.
if there is someone who is more outwardly Halloween right now than any of us, Dylan's wearing a Cannibal Corpse t-shirt and has like just the most grotesque sleeve. It's great. Beautiful. Shout out
Ryan McDonald.
Yeah, formerly
He's
of
the dude.
Death Card, and
Love that dude to death.
what's the tattoo place that he
Dead Ahead Tattoo.
shout out Dead Ahead Tattoo.
Fantastic. If you are in the Nashville area, book all your appointments there. They do great work. Very comfortable shop.
Let me flash that bad boy for me real quick. Let me see that pup.
Oh God. Let's see if we can get it.
Atta
There
boy.
he is.
Man, the Pringles the Pringles guys never look better.
Let's see if we can get that in there. They're the severed. It just looks like mush from here. But he did very good work. He's doing very good work. Any interest in that area, definitely hit up Dead Ahead Tattoos.
But also going back to why I love Halloween, I also realized that I love the Halloween movies I love the most are the campiest, and it's because I'm just a goofball idiot. And there's no other time of the year to be a goofball idiot more than Halloween.
Big true.
Whoop, 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 whoop. You know, you're right. You're right. I grew up in a divorced household, which I think Swindle, you and I can, meet on that one. But I got introduced to like horror and like kind of spookier stuff and scarier stuff early on. So I distinctly always remember being excited. Swindle, you might remember this. Austin, you might remember this, but this could be a little bit before. I remember when Nickelodeon used to do something around Halloween that was fantastic. The whole month of October, they would do all of these Halloween themed episodes, be it Rugrats, be it Doug. Real Monsters was amazing. I loved it. Are You Afraid of the Dark? The original one of that.
There's a Keenan and Kel episode.
There's a great Keenan and Kel episode.
Hey Arnold episodes, Halloween.
Yeah. Like I loved the Nickelodeon stuff. They did it so well. And that kind of like seeing Real Monsters really set me off because it was like, oh, this is great. It's like these monsters going to school and like they had the Grumble was their teacher. And they had this great aspect to it. And then years later, USA used to always do these great horror months. And the first horror film that I ever saw in whole was Child's Play 2. And something about those movies, something about those shows just made me feel very comfortable. I always liked, you could even go as far back as like looking at like Batman. Some of the aspects of like the Tim Burton Batmans were pretty scary in effect. You look at the second one, which is Batman Returns, and like, Danny DeVito as the Penguin is terrifying. And you look at that, and I saw Nightmare Before Christmas in theaters in 1993. That's one of my first memories I have is seeing that movie in theaters with my mom and dad. And I've always been able to grasp to that. And, our mutual friend Wyatt Dunning has referred to me in the past as like, closet goth, and Austin himself has referred to me as H&M goth. And it's like, I've always had kind of an affinity towards horror movies and kind of the darker side of film. And when I made that connection between that and like heavier forms of music, the first one, what's funny is it's 3 soundtracks, and it's movies I've never seen, but I know the soundtracks. Scream 3 had Slipknot's Wait and Bleed on it. And that was a big deal to me. I heard that. I was like, what is this? What am I hearing? So that came out in like 99, maybe 2000. So that was one of the first things I heard. Maybe some of the singles from Rob Zombie's Hellbilly Deluxe, which is a very horror themed kind of record. I somehow ended up in a very strange way with a copy of the Dracula 2000 soundtrack, which has Slayer's Bloodline on it, which is from their God Hates Us All album. Has System of a Down covering the Metro, that 80s hit, on it. And it has a Pantera deep cut called Avoid the Light, which is this very vampiric kind of song. And is like a B-side on I think it's the Great Southern Trendkill record, maybe. So I got those really early on. I just ended up with them. And also the Alone in the Dark soundtrack, which was just filled with like Roadrunner, Century Media, Nuclear Blast, like heavy bands like Dimmu Borgir, In Flames, Shadows Fall, Machine Head, Cradle of Filth, and Meshuggah. And like slowly but surely it kind of started to delve into that. I can remember being 3 or 4 years old, being in a hotel room with my parents and seeing Leprechaun on TV. And just being like, I want to see more of stuff like this. It terrified me. Stuff scared the shit out of me, but I wanted to see more. And maybe at that point it was like an adrenaline thing because, if you watch a really good horror movie, sometimes that anxiety kicks in a little bit. The heart rate pumps up a little bit. It's like, oh, okay, this is great. And I always felt really accepted during this time of year. I always felt really comfortable with it. I grew up in Arkansas where like it was basically hot until mid-October, and then it would kind of cool down. And feeling that first chill in the autumn air was always really nice. Like I remember walking around just like I grew up out in the sticks, having my Walkman on, walking around where I would live or in the neighborhoods that I would live in with just like whatever it was I was listening to on at the time, and just feeling very comfortable and feeling very kind of at one with what was going on. Like it's not some sort of metaphysical thing, but it is very much like, oh, this is great. Like everybody's dressed up in these outfits, all the decorations are out. This is the stuff I really like, and this is the type of imagery I like. And it finally felt comfortable being around all that stuff, and it almost felt like everyone was finally accepting the things that I was into. And it was just great. I think we've all kind of answered the second question I had, which was, how does the love of heavy music tie in with this month? Like I gave some examples of like hearing the Scream soundtrack, the Dracula 2000 soundtrack. What were some of the first instances for you guys of like getting horror meshed with the love of like heavier music? What were some of the instances of like hearing something in a soundtrack that maybe you recognized as like, oh, that's something I'd be into?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, I don't know why it came to mind when you were like describing some of your experiences with heavy music and horror. There was I got like a repressed, like a reissue of Slayer's Live Undead. And that album cover is literally just the band as zombies and in a graveyard. And
very Ed Repka, almost.
Yeah.
Who's the guy that did Iron Maiden's cover? Or
shit, I can't remember.
Very reminiscent of that.
Well, you're right though. It's like very like kind of cartoonish. There's a style to it. And then like it was also it wasn't like a color variant of like the particular record, but it was almost like a buzzsaw. So it had like blood splattered all over the thing.
Oh, that's cool.
So it always like felt like there was a connection to horror and metal. And that was like a pretty early get for me as far as like record collecting. Like I saw that instantly, was like, I need to have that. You'd go to the store, you see Cannibal Corpse, eaten back to life. I was like, oh, that's definitely there. But as far as like a movie that had like metal, I don't know, maybe it's like not so much music for me that I realized it was like the aesthetic of it. Like some of the look always felt like, you look at a movie like Return of the Living Dead, right?
Yeah. The leather, the spikes.
Takes place in Louisville, R.I.P. Louisville in that movie. But there's like a kind of person who
the mohawk.
Yeah, it's all there. So like those types of people, it always felt like, whether you're an outlier or like an outcast or something like that, those people were always kind of represented in movies. And I think if you are into hardcore, you're into metal, you're into like extreme forms of music, or like just kind of like outlier music in general, I guess, I think you will definitely have a place in horror. I think that's kind of the part of the reason why I think I feel so close to you guys in a lot of ways, is because not only do we connect over music, but we also just connect a lot of the times over just batshit, like ridiculous, dumb movies, like whether it be horror or, 50s sci-fi. I don't know. We would, like an overlying theme of our friendship has revolved around Swindle's couch, surfing through on a Friday or Saturday night. Like, okay, does this sound ridiculous enough, or does this look cool? Like, what is this? And then we watch and kind of talk over it the entire time. But a lot of my fondest memories in hanging out with you guys over like the past decade plus has been around like horror or like weird sci-fi shit.
I mean, Swindle and I have been discussing trauma films, I think, since we first started hanging out, loosely here and there. But yeah, Swindle, what's your take on the question? What's your kind of backing on that?
Well, I was, before I get into mine, to add on to Austin's, like that trope of metal and horror and metal like still exists to this day, manifesting like as recently as last night when we watched Terrifier 2, when that kid had like a nuclear blast sticker and like every metal band poster on his wall and like Metal Blade Records sticker.
I mean, you've got Chris Jericho from Fozzy like in there. Like, I mean, yeah, like it's Fozzy, but like still it's metal adjacent stuff. Like there's a tie-in with it.
I think this is like so uncool in quotes, but I think probably the first thing I can think of is Bodies in Jason X. And I don't even think I like watched
That's funny.
When it came out. I don't think I was like watching those movies then.
Yeah, like we heard, you and I both kind of grew up like wrestling fans. So like Bodies was definitely used a lot in those old WWF, WWE kind of pay-per-view promotions and stuff. I mean, heck, what was it? The old SmackDown theme was The Beautiful People by Marilyn Manson. So there's a tie in there, right? Heavy aggressive music ties into some of these like niche things that we're fans of. I'm trying to think of the first instance of like heavy music in a movie that I saw. Like I had these soundtracks of movies I'd never seen. Maybe it was Bride of Chucky with some of the Rob Zombie tracks. Maybe Living Dead Girl is the intro. It kicks in with that weird kind of like bend or slide or whatever it is.
Man,
and like it kicks into that.
You weren't paying attention to the music in that movie. I know you for years.
We are not talking about that. Bless every actor and or actress in the roles that they played in that movie. That's all I'm saying. I love the series to this day. But you're right. It ties in. There's kind of a very like, for lack of a better, no pun intended, there's very much a vibe of like the Misfits have a time of year for us to kind of unite and like, feel comfortable, right? Be it walking into a fucking Walmart, be it walking into anywhere, like everybody's got Halloween decorations on. I remember watching Hocus Pocus as a kid and loving the vibe of that movie. Nightmare Before Christmas gets a very weird kind of following with like, I know when probably more so when Paulson grew up, and he saw more of it on the back end when it was just like this like merch driven, like overindulged thing.
Well, you say that, and I had the tape. Like, I wore that shit out.
Oh, I did too.
But I also worked at a Walgreens, and even to this day, this movie's been out for over 20 years. Yeah, it's like
just 2 weeks ago, 30 years.
Every year before this time, I mean, we've all probably worked in retail in some form or whatever, but
I mean, I worked at Hot Topic.
Jeez. I mean, well, Swindle was do they have any like Halloween things at the kitchen you worked at the
there was always so much blood around from where people just
that's amazing.
Cut their thumbs off.
But yeah, you're right. Like, even that was probably a big introductory movie for a lot of younger millennials, older millennials now, into what horror is. I'm sure that's a lot of people's first like foray into like, oh, I like this kind of like edgier, spookier, scarier kind of concepts. Be it that or like the what is it? Del Toro just did a movie series, Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark. A lot of kids grew up with those novels, and I didn't read those till I was much older. I didn't have those. I remember my dad telling me a bedtime story of this. I've never looked it up, but of a story called Bloody Bones, basically about this like figure that would come out of the closet at night and would scare children so they would sleep in their bed tight and stuff like that.
God damn.
I remember that. And like, so like, yeah, like I've always had that kind of aspect of like, oh, I want to hear more about this. I mean, and then watching wrestling, and then like Swindle can attest to this. You see The Undertaker and like Kane. I mean, those are horror characters. Paul Bear, fantastic character, horror character. Mankind, absolutely.
I know we'll get into our list here in a second, but I know another thing that was like super pivotal, kind of getting into horror too, would be like, a month-long marathon of, it was like AMC's Fright Fest, which they still do
those
today.
Were great.
I would watch that every day, like during October. My brother and I, like, I was introduced to so many movies, albeit they're edited for television, but
absolutely.
I was exposed to a lot of horror through that, and then kind of would move on. But also, I mean, I'm still an avid watcher of, our local hero. Svengoolie is like been on since the 70s. That's huge for me. I would like that dude hosted also like a Three Stooges show that like every morning before school you could watch it, but he was like he didn't have like the makeup or like the character, so he was just like a dude. And then all of a sudden he would just pivot into being like,
that's perfect,
the horror host that still persists to this day. So but yeah, that's like definitely a big up for me.
I want to add something. One of my favorite memories is I believe you came up for a visit and we all got together at Swindle's house, and we like Swindle was like angling an antenna so we could all watch Svengoolie. That's one of my favorite memories. But I also want to shout out a Svengoolie guest that was on. As of recording this, it is Chicago's own CM Punk's birthday. Swindle and I are big fans of his. So always like to give a shout out. He's a fan. He's obviously a fan of heavier music, obviously a fan of horror as well. He starred in a great horror movie called The Girl on the Third Floor, which if you've never seen it, I believe it's still on Netflix. It's a fun film. It's a haunted house film. But shout out to CM Punk.
Do y'all remember what that Svengoolie was? Was there like,
what was
I feel like there was a reason that we like were really trying to watch it, and it wasn't just because it was.
Was it the Bowling Green movie?
No, I don't think so.
Think so, but maybe.
No, I mean that was a great one too. I mean, yeah, all of us like former residents of Bowling Green, Kentucky. The Haunted Ween movie filmed in Bowling Green on campus and around. Like we went to a screening of it on campus that one time where the director, had like showed it and then they answered questions or whatever. But
that's cool.
That's always fun when you can like tie it in like that. But
Swindle can attest to this. I haven't been able to go, but they are holding like they're showing these old classic horror films at the Capitol now, which is so cool. Like they've shown The Thing, they've shown Alien, they've shown all these great movies, and that's such a cool thing to see that's happening, throughout the year as well. You don't get a lot of that for like normal films, right? And I hate to like say anything's a normal film because film is art, but it's great to see that there's a group of people that love horror so much or sci-fi so much that it's like, oh no, we need a night dedicated just to this. Like, seeing Alien in a theater, which I obviously didn't get to see because it was released in 1979, would be fantastic. Like I got to see The Thing in theaters recently within the last year or so for its 40th anniversary. It was so fucking cool to see it in almost its original form. And I had never seen that movie in its unaltered state because I grew up watching it on TNT. And it was so fucking cool to see something like that in theaters. And I've got a couple experiences with watching these great horror films in theaters that I'll never forget. And seeing that and feeling that anxiety like pumping through my chest of being legitimately scared or legitimately sickened at what I was seeing. That's irreplaceable. I've never felt that type of energy except at specific shows I went to growing up as a kid, or like even going to specific shows as an older man and getting that same equivalent energy out of both of those.
Well, we've gotten together, obviously, to celebrate this glorious day, this glorious spoopy day. But we also have like gathered a list of picks. Both, we kind of mentioned these two worlds of like heavy music and horror are synonymous with one another. So we figured, what better way to celebrate this than share some picks, movies and bands or music that we feel like represent this kind of theme, this holiday to us very effectively, I guess.
So with that, this was hard. I'm sure this was hard for both of you guys too. This was really hard for me to find. We basically settled with 5 movies and 10 artists. We picked a song from each artist, and just so we could create a playlist of like, hey, check this out. These are great Halloween spooky centric artists that work, right? The movies were really hard. So why don't we start out with the movies, right? We go to that and then we'll go into, the songs that we picked in that facet. Austin, why don't you start us out with the movies you picked?
This first pick, I went kind of chronological with my list here, but this wasn't one that I've probably watched for the first time within the past few years. We watched this as part of our like movie marathon thing we've done through October. Swindle and our friend Will started this like, how long you guys been doing it, you think?
5 or 6 years, something like that.
So I kind of tagged along as it seemed fun, loved it. And I've seen a lot of great movies, seen a lot of terrible movies through it as well. But House from 1977 was on a list. I can't remember what year, but it's a Japanese horror film. It like kind of features like a group of girls who are going to visit this house of like an aunt, and like it kind of plays out in a very like realistic, grounded way, and then it just goes off the fucking rails at one point. It is like so creative and unique with some of the like the effects and like, I mean, there's like a piano. I don't know, like the piano scene.
That piano scene's fucking insane.
Yeah. So there's like,
I've never seen it.
I think it's on like the first time I saw it, it was like on Criterion Channel, but
it's been on Max. I don't know if it still is on Max though.
I don't really have a lot of like facts about it, or like, like this was kind of a newer favorite, I would say, for me. But in getting into horror, I think it's important to one, branch out. I think unfortunately, as like Americans with music especially too, but like with film, we kind of live in this very like insular kind of bubble, and we don't often like look to other countries for, I mean, like there are so many great horror movies that exist outside of the United States for sure. I mean,
Man,
we could talk about
The Girl That Walks Alone at Midnight is fantastic.
Yeah. I mean, it's just, you know, maybe you have to read some captions, but I highly recommend, you know, watching Giallo films or, you know, Korean horror, obviously like been a really big scene of horror movies. But yeah, this was a movie that I had never heard of before. I don't really remember how I came across it or why, like we decided this was the year to watch it. But this one, I think for just the sheer ridiculous nature of like, it really, like just when you think you have the movie figured out, it does something completely fucking out there.
I think it may have ended up on the list because I watched it on my own and then was just like, oh no, like they have to watch this now too, like because like I was saying at the beginning of this podcast, like it is goofball, like so much of that movie is just goofball shit. Like one of my favorite parts of the movie, which is not part of what makes it scary at all, but they are going out to the country and they get off the bus and there's a very tight shot of these like 5 girls and they pan out. The background has been like a country setting and they pan out and it's just a billboard of the country in the middle of the country. Like what?
Yeah,
they
that's
were
perfect.
Just standing in front of the billboard.
It's weird because it almost like starts as like a soap opera in a way, because it's like, okay, well, the girl's mom had passed away and the dad remarries or is like dating someone new, and so there's like some sort of weird dynamic there. And yeah, so I don't know, it's got everything. And you think about the late 70s and what was going on in horror at the time, definitely no one was putting out a movie like this before. So I guess if anything, I really like this movie. It's become certainly a favorite of mine. I would definitely recommend watching it this season or the next, or just watch it in general. It's a good thing to do. The next one, whatever you feel about this director is probably true. It's absolutely, you have every right.
It's a classic.
This movie is so good. I was also a huge fan of the Blues Brothers when it came out, which like obviously being from the Chicagoland area, it was huge. But this movie came like right out either, I want to say they were kind of like right after each other. I could be wrong, but American Werewolf in London is like,
it was so hard for me not to put this on my list. It was so hard.
This is like a really good blending of both comedy and horror. They have like, there's just
great
like
soundtrack too.
Great soundtrack, a lot of Moon songs, of course.
Yeah. Yep.
But it rides the line so well. Obviously, perhaps like one of the best use of effects at this time as well, with like
Rich Baker,
of course. American. I don't know if he's a student, but he's literally just backpacking through the English countryside with his friend. They come across a werewolf. His friend dies. He's unscathed, but he, was at least scratched or attacked by a werewolf. So now he is a werewolf himself, and there's only really one way to lift the curse. And so, I mean, the one-liners from this movie, Dylan and I have like rifled back and forth countless times.
Yeah.
There are just so many classic scenes that I'm like,
that last scene.
The last scene, which they really did film in Piccadilly Square or Circle or whatever the fuck you call it. I don't know. They really filmed Shapes. Okay. They filmed it on location, and they had to really like, the way they did it. It was like you have to work so fast. So it's like I don't know, like how it just erupts into craziness at the end if you've ever seen it. But yeah, that would definitely be one for me where I'm like, this is damn near a perfect movie. If not, I don't know. The next movie I'm going to talk about kind of already got said earlier in the episode, but The Thing. Perhaps
It's
like
on my
I
list
think
too.
I think it's like maybe my favorite movie ever. Former Bowling Green resident John Carpenter directed, critically panned when it came out.
Yeah.
Everybody hated it. I think it had to go up against like E.T. or like some crazy list of movies, because if I remember right, I don't know if it came out around like a time like spooky season or anything, but I think no one was looking to see a movie like this that was so bleak and claustrophobic. It was. I think it came out in the summer, basically, is what I'm thinking of. Like, no one's wanting to go see. Like, they want feel good movies. They don't want just like a paranoid, character driven. Yeah, it's an interesting movie. Shot super well. Everything looks amazing. The performances are awesome. Kurt Russell, Wilford Brimley, Keith David's in it. Yeah. I mean, if you haven't watched it, just a research facility in Antarctica uncovers an alien basically who is able to shapeshift and kind of picks off the crew one by one, but kind of taking form of their likeness. So everybody, there's no trust amongst anyone. So it's awesome. And you really
a warning.
Yeah.
A warning for people that are really affected by this, but dog murder right off the
yeah,
they
immediately
first fucking thing.
Just
and
bap.
and also kind of separately, in case people haven't watched John Carpenter movies, he'll kill a kid too.
Oh, dude.
He does not give a fuck.
Doesn't
He will
care.
kill a
Assault on
kid.
Precinct 13.
I was literally just gonna say, shoot.
Oh, yeah.
They just drilled that kid in the chest.
outside of an
Wow.
ice cream truck.
Damn.
So you dropped this earlier, Austin, but like there's comparisons between this movie and I recently watched 30 Days a Night, and there's comparisons in both of those movies. It takes place in Alaska. There's a dog murder like immediately. It sets off the whole movie. Like some tie-ins there.
Yeah, I mean, I think this one's in Antarctica maybe, but
You might. I think you're right. Actually,
it's the cold, whatever.
It's
but
snowy.
One of them definitely is better than the other one. I'll just say
Absolutely.
that.
Although I will say 30 Days a Night's one of the better vampire movies I've seen in the last 20 years or so.
It's got that guy from
Josh Hartnett.
Yeah, which I'm sure anyone listening to this would be like, oh yeah, dude from Black Hawk Down. I always think of that dude from
Orange
4
County.
days and 7 nights.
40 Days and 40 Nights.
Yeah, that's right. That's
Dylan
right.
Dylan got it wrong again. That's Colin Hanks.
No.
Yeah.
No. Is it? God. Tom Hanks has like 40 kids. So
Yeah.
this is the one that's not the white rapper.
Every actor looks the same. To
That's
Dylan.
right. 40 Days and 40 Nights. Also
God,
not great. But I
right.
remember
Oh.
I remember seeing that like out at the it was like at my local theater, like a poster. I'm like, oh, what is this movie? 30 Days and 30 Nights. Also, when that came out, I remember being downtown and they had like a bunch of those huge like posters that you could just like get up upside. Like they had like a really particularly good street campaign, I guess, getting all the posters on the wall. I think that's a movie that has a really good idea, but maybe not executed that great. But The Thing, I mean, if you're listening to this and you don't agree with me, I don't know. This is a classic. It's a great horror movie, but it's also probably just a great movie in general. So there is an earlier version of this next movie that stars
Starring
Vincent Price, which I absolutely love. However, I think no one would disagree with me in saying that the David Cronenberg version from 1986, starring Jeff Goldblum, is wonderful. It's definitely the better version. Perhaps one of the best body horror movies of all time. A scientist who invents like teleportation, basically, gets stuck inside a machine with a fly and becomes a fly mutant. and is changing into a fly mutant. This movie is filthy. It's disgusting. It's
Yeah.
wild.
There's some great gross out stuff in
Oh
that.
man, I mean, just like fingernails falling off and like
Yep.
ligaments
vomiting.
and oh yeah. So
Yep.
I would say this is a favorite. Again, great effects, kind of going off of like The Thing and obviously American Werewolf in London. This is another movie where you're like, man, the latex budget of this flick.
Yeah. The smell of the latex all across the film set.
Set some people back for sure. I think this kind of scratches the itch of one. I think it's a great movie. It's a great story. But it's also just like that horror thing of, wow, this is so intense. This is so horrific. You can't look away from it. But they've had I think they did a Fly 2. I saw that this year as well.
I saw that too.
It's got I forget the guy's name. He's in Mask. I forget what is that guy's name? You know what I'm talking about? Not The Mask, but Mask.
No, I know who you're talking about.
That is what I was about to be like. Jim
it's
Carrey.
the guy that was in. It's the guy that. Yep, I know exactly the movie The Share. I know exactly what you're talking about.
But it's fine. Whatever. Fly's great. I love that movie. Maybe people will disagree with me on this as well. You might want to go with the original. The original's great too, but I think each movie kind of has its own unique thing. You could kind of watch them each on their own in a way. I mean, they all have like tying factors to them, but Exorcist 3, Legion is pretty badass. Love that movie.
Brad Dourif is fantastic in that role. My God.
It's so insane. Brad Dourif. I actually watched. I'd seen him in other things. Obviously, he's known for being Chucky. I remember seeing him in One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest.
Grimo Wormtongue in the Lord of the Rings series.
So I mean, he's in a lot of wonderful actor. His performance in this movie is like the pinnacle. It's like so good. This movie, I want to say it's not like a typical horror movie. I don't think it plays out in a similar way as like it's specifically gory, or there's not like a lot of jump scares, but it is like implied. It's a lot of it's like, yeah, it really is. It's like, it's very like a detective kind of movie. It's a mystery. But there are like definitely some horror elements to this movie as well. But yeah, the sheer scene is definitely up there as like being super terrifying, and it's a slow burn for sure. You're that whole scene in general plays out very slowly, and just when you think like nothing's gonna happen, something jumps out, and it does. But George C. Scott plays like kind of the main.
He's great.
Main detective. He is just the angriest person who's ever existed in history.
Did you watch Rescuers Down Under, Dylan, as a kid?
Oh, of course I did.
He's the poacher. When
Joanna eggs. Oh my God, that's him.
When I was watching Exorcist 3 just like a couple months ago, in like the middle of the movie, when he realizes his family is about to be like murdered, he just like ran to this taxi and was like, "Go to the house!" And I was like, "Oh my God!" I just like was like, "Joanna!"
Oh my God, that is perfect. I just watched this movie for the first time ever, like earlier this year, and was just in awe at how good it was. Because it's like it's the third movie in a series that's already like, essentially that first film in the series is considered untouchable by anything, because it's the only movie that like kind of like movie snobs will be like, oh, that's passable even though it's a horror film.
So it's what's great about it, in my opinion, too, is that you essentially have the guy who wrote the series is directing it. William Peter Blatty wrote the novel, he directed the film, and he wrote the original. But then you have William Friedkin, who they were very close, from what I understand. They were like very good buddies. So I think there's like at least that sort of like kind of connection and affinity with it. But to have the guy who essentially wrote the concept in general, to have him directed it is really, really cool. But it plays out like a novel too. Like I feel like it plays out like it's someone who like wrote a book basically directed it. Like the dialogue alone. I mean, the fucking fish scene is like the carp in the shower or in the bathtub. Awesome. So good. So I would say, yeah, House, American Werewolf in London, The Thing, The Fly, and Exorcist 3. And maybe those interchange out depending on what kind of mood I'm in.
Yeah.
But I would say that without really giving any sort of, maybe The Thing's probably my favorite, but to have like 5 pretty solid movies, I would recommend any of those movies.
For my list, I mean, there are 2 that like are definitely my favorite, and one of them is my favorite movie of all time. But like the other 3 are just kind of movies that I could rewatch like at any point, and are the most rewatchable to me in my horror movie experience. The first one, not a horror movie, but horror themed, and it's Young Frankenstein.
Oh, there it is.
My favorite movie of all time.
Yes.
Of course, directed by Mel Brooks, based on kind of a little bit based on the book, but also based on every movie in the Universal series franchise of Frankenstein. Talk about quotes. Y'all are talking about quotes.
Man.
This movie has all the quotes. I could just sit and quote Young Frankenstein all day. I watch it every year on Halloween. A great thing about this movie is Mel Brooks found like one of the crew of like the original Frankenstein from 1931, and all of like the set in the lair is from the original Frankenstein
That's
movie.
wild. I didn't know that.
Yeah, the guy just had it like sitting.
Oh, it's just in my shed.
Oh, what do you need? You need some
somehow.
chains? You need some cobwebs or something?
Oh, we got it. Oh, that big electrical thingy, Bob. We got it.
Yeah. So that thing that Marty Feldman has to just like run up and slap, like that probably was just real. He just probably like had to slap it.
like,
to get it to
yeah,
stop.
I don't
So we talk about quotes in that movie. Like Marty Feldman is one of the funniest people I've ever heard in a movie. And there are bits in that movie in particular. The scene when Gene Wilder's fiance comes to the castle, and that scene had to be filmed like 70 some odd times. And the final take that they got, Gene Wilder's laughing, but that's the only good take they could get. My favorite scene that Marty Feldman is in that movie is when Gene Wilder and his assistant are going down the stairs, and they're going through the heads, and Marty Feldman's head is in there, and he just starts, I ain't got no body. Every time. Since I was like 9 years old when I saw that movie, every time gets me.
My second movie for my John Carpenter movie, I chose The Fog, but really it could be interchangeable between any, like The Fog, Halloween 1 for me. I wouldn't really consider it a horror movie, but They Live.
Yeah.
The Thing, like almost any of those John Carpenter movies. But for some reason, I could just rewatch The Fog like over and over again. It's got Jamie Lee Curtis in it. It's got, I don't know his name, but he's in Halloween 3.
Tom Atkins. That
guy.
Yeah,
who's in everything. Creepshow.
Yeah, he's in Creepshow. He's in Halloween 3, like you said. He's also in a movie called Night of the Creeps, which is a favorite of mine.
Yes.
Halloween 3.
That's a fun one.
Almost made my list. He's also in Maniac Cop, I'm pretty sure.
Oh, yes, he is. That's a fun one.
So yeah, I think, Tom Atkins, who's just like B-movie royalty.
Yep.
But yeah, Halloween 3 is like almost made my list because I love that movie. But
that's probably my second. That's my second or third favorite of the Halloween series because it's different.
Yeah,
and I love it. But anyway, sorry, Swindle.
Also, Adrienne Barbeau's in that movie. Love Adrienne Barbeau. It's like, I don't know. I don't think anybody's really gotten into the plot of their movies, but like it's got murderous pirates, and the theme of the movie is kind of like you can't escape your past. Fun.
I've never seen it.
Good shit.
Yeah. It's probably the most like, I love all the shots. I mean, she works at that radio station that's like off the side of a
lighthouse.
cliff. Yeah. Like, hey, every day you just gotta go. Like, obviously I work in radio. It'd just be so funny if I had to just walk down a jagged cliffside to a radio and a lighthouse.
A lighthouse.
Yeah. Oh my God.
My number 3, which almost made Austin's list, Suspiria.
Yep. Yeah. I saw that you put it there, and I was like, I'll let you take it.
Yeah. So for me, although I obviously love music and it's like one of the most important parts of my life, for me, I'm a weirdo because I don't just always notice soundtracks of movies. And another thing about me is, in general, I don't always qualify why I like things. Like, I'm not, when I listen to music, I'm not like, I love this and this is the reason why I love this. So when the first time I watched Suspiria, I was like, holy shit, the music is insane. And immediately I was like, the reason I love this music is because it's just constantly moving. There's like no space in the music. Yeah. It's just like always doing something constantly.
Kind of suffocating.
Yeah, and it really sets the tone. Goblin did an amazing job for the soundtrack of that movie. Just pushing the movie along, making the movie maybe even more eerie than like it should have been. And like the movie's really famous for like kind of color blocking. A lot of it is just red. And there's like a scene where everybody's in bed where the whole thing is green. Just a lot of colors. And I love that movie because first scene is just brutal death. 2 people get killed and it's brutal murder. And then it kind of like cools down for a while. And then there's also just a really brutal scene with razor fencing.
Oh my God. Yeah. Jesus Christ.
Lauren and I watched both of the Suspiria films pretty recently. She was really interested in seeing the remake. I'd never seen it. And then I said, obviously we need to watch the original. Swindle. I watched it for the first time with you, Swindle, I think maybe last year. I really enjoyed it. And I just kept telling her, I was like, listen, the remake's fine. Like it's a dance movie, but the original is like terrifying. There's some like violent stuff taking place in this. Although I will say in the remake, the whole ending scene is so bonkers.
Wild.
That I was like, okay, I'll give it a pass.
Wilder than the original? I haven't seen it, so I have no idea.
It doesn't make it is
Makes
just
no
like
sense.
Yeah. It's just like, let's do the weirdest thing possible at the end of this movie.
Tilda Swinton's pretty good in it, though. I will say that. She's good in that movie.
Number 4 is The Tingler, which maybe not my favorite movie, but I do love rewatching. It's directed by the same guy that did House on Haunted Hill, the original House on Haunted Hill, which if I look at my notes is William Castle. And with these 2 movies especially, he like became known for having gimmicks for his movies. Like in House on Haunted Hill, there is a scene where like a skeleton pops out, and in the theater where House on Haunted Hill was premiered, he dropped a skeleton from the rafters in the theater just to scare the absolute fuck out of everyone there. And the thing with The Tingler, the plot is like this doctor finds a being, like a bug essentially growing on people's spine. And if you don't scream when you're scared, then the bug like grows and it eventually kills you. And his gimmick for this movie was he had like buzzers put in people's chairs in the theater. So at random times, random seats buzzers would go off and people would just like jump and scream in the middle of the movie.
That's perfect.
but there is like Vincent Price is in this movie also, which everybody loves Vincent Price. There are a million Vincent Price movies that are great, but the best part of this movie is there's a scene, and the whole movie's in black and white. This one scene was filmed on color film, but they painted the whole set black and white just so like it's a scene where there's a tub and there's blood in it. So the blood is red, but everything else is black and white. And there's like a deaf person in this movie that's like one of the main characters, and she gets just the fuck scared out of her because there's this like tub full of blood in her house, and like a hand pops out of the tub full of blood, and because she's deaf, she like doesn't scream,
Right.
and she just dies like right there, right on the spot.
It's good plot.
My last movie is Diabolic.
Diabolique.
I don't know if you recommended that movie, Austin.
Yeah, it was like, I'm a bit of a connoisseur. I pay $10 a month for Criterion, so it's like a French film. I think we watched it during one of our Halloween viewings or whatever. But yeah, the movie kicks ass.
Yeah, if you're from Kentucky, Tennessee, or Arkansas, this guy's name is Henry Georges Clouzot. That's the director's name. But this movie came out in 1955. It's a very tense movie. Like the main character is also like kind of sickly in this movie, and she has a husband that's cheating on her, and the main character and the girl he's cheating,
rat bastard.
The main character and the girl he's cheating on her with plot to murder this guy and dump him in a pool, and then shit keeps happening to make this sickly person like more and more paranoid, and it's very tense, very paranoid, and yeah, a wild thing happens at the end.
It's French 9 to 5. Is that it?
Yeah.
What's the critic thing? I like French films, stinky, soggy French films, or whatever it is.
So yeah, those are my 5. We got Young Frankenstein, The Fog, Suspiria, The Tingler, and Diabolique.
Oh my God, it's mine. So this was really hard, as I'm sure it was for you guys, because we love horror and horror adjacent things so much, because they typically, to me at least, tend to be the most interesting films. You know, it seems like there's no holds barred when it comes to horror. There's no like glass ceiling that you have to hit with that. And you can literally do anything with horror. So I'll go ahead and say this. These are in no order at all for me. The Thing was one. This was a really hard decision because Carpenter has so many good films, especially horror adjacent films. It came down to this and the original Halloween, which is, to me, proto slasher. Like, it's like Texas Chainsaw Massacre. It's not necessarily a slasher yet. They created the genre. But The Thing is, I remember watching that on TBS and TNT as a kid, just on reruns, and enjoying it, and seeing the scene where they go to operate on the guy and the head falls off and all of that goes on with like the head turning into a spider and growing the eyes. Seeing the design of it just made me lose my mind and go, this is one of the best things I've ever seen. And I didn't actually get to see the movie in whole till I was in my 30s. And it just cemented that it was such a good film. I might have actually have seen it when Joe Bob was hosting Monster Vision.
Oh yeah, TNT.
At that point, I might have actually seen that on TNT. But we've talked about it a lot. But Carpenter's The Thing is so good. No matter what version of it you see, watch it at least once. It's a great sci-fi and or horror adjacent movie. I will say this: it came down to Halloween and Christine for him. And the great thing with like tie-ins with music is like Carpenter does all of his own music, and his music when you hear it. And he has had such an influence on a lot of horror soundtracks. So if you're into like movie soundtracks, any of his like compilations that he's released in the last handful of years are always fun to see.
Yeah, he it was at Sacred Bones, the same label
Yeah.
that's done like Thou and shit like that. There's a lot of, I mean, he basically just like works with his son, and then there's
Yes.
the son of another person who is also very famous, and I can't remember his name, but all of that stuff is great. Stuff that they have done like outside of film. But yeah, very minimalist, very eerie kind of shit. So
fits the movies no matter what. Going from there, I kind of wanted to spread it out from different eras of film that I have. I am a big fan of the misunderstood monster when it comes to movies. Frankenstein, the Wolfman, Nosferatu, which is a personal favorite. But I have to put the Creature from the Black Lagoon. And watching that, it's a 50s. It's kind of the tail end of the Universal horror cycle. I guess the Golden Age is what it was called. It's one of the tail end of it. It's before we got more into the sci-fi realm. But it's a great depiction of what the horrors of humanity are, in my opinion, because the monster was defending its kind of home, its territory. And you had these humans coming in doing all these different things, wanting to do all these studies and everything. And it's just like coming out and then doing all that. And for a movie that came out in 1954, it's pretty topical for today's kind of time period. It's also one of the first movies that had a female designed character in it. I believe she did all the makeup and the costume design for the creature. And great film. It's like an hour long.
The sequels of these movies we watched also,
they don't exist.
Amazing, honestly. I will say the obvious. Okay,
The one where he talks.
oh man, dude. Okay, I just can't. There's one where it's almost like Jurassic Park kind of themed, in where they're like, all right, let's capture the monster and put him like, in a little like SeaWorld kind of thing.
Terrarium.
And then he just escaped. Like, who could have foreseen this happening? And then I think in the third one, they try to make him like more of a like man person, and he's built like a brick shithouse and just it's so funny. But the original is a classic. The other ones are just
absolutely. Those sequels were basically made with like, how much money can we make off of this pre-existing movie series? But they did it. They did it. Somehow those made money, and I'm sure those are fun. So I've definitely got to check those out. And continuing to move through, this is a movie that I didn't see till my 20s, but I saw the imagery like very early on and was always drawn to it. It's the original Hellraiser, Clive Barker's Hellraiser that was released in 1987. Something about a movie like that, it's a slow burn compared to some other movies. You don't see the Cenobites very often, but when you do, it's poignant. And it's there. It has a reason for it. But the Pinhead character always terrified me. Just seeing that kind of almost forbidden fruit with the plot of the movie of like it's pure. It's supposed to be the most purest form of pleasure you see, and it's like they're all in bondage gear. Their skin's torn apart. They're disfigured, and it's just great when they show up. I think they're only in the movie like 10 minutes.
not long.
And it's good. And that whole ending scene where they tear Frank apart is one of my favorite parts. And Jesus Wept is so good.
With the movie, it's like Frank is like fucking
Terrible.
disgusting through the entire thing.
Yeah.
So while you don't get like the Cenobites, Frank is like a full on just a meat,
Yes, that's the worst part for me. When he like first comes out of the box or whatever after having opened it, and he's just like doesn't have any skin, and he's like
Just viscera.
help me, and they like have to murder people to
Yes.
give him like skin
that
and shit.
that first
Ugh.
kill alone is like, what the fuck are we watching?
I love it. I distinctly remember, Austin, you and I, CJ, and our friend Cody being stuck at my house during a snowstorm,
Yes.
and we watched that.
Yep.
while eating pizza and just hammering Coors Lights. And I love every second
feel
of that
the
movie.
burning sun. Sorry.
There we go. I love that movie. Shout out to the second Hellraiser, which is Hellbound, Hellraiser 2. It's not directed by Clive Barker like this one was, but it's a continuation of the original movie, whereas like the other sequels are kind of just movies with Pinhead thrown in it. Hellraiser 3 is fun.
Hellraiser 3, Miami. Hellraiser 4,
San Andreas. Yeah. But the second one is a great throw in. Clive Barker is a great writer. He wrote another movie called, he wrote another novel called Midian that became a movie called Nightbreed that is batshit insane. David Cronenberg is in the movie as a character. It's completely insane. But if you ever have a chance to watch Hellraiser, please do that. And also read the novel Hellbound Heart, because it's fucking fantastic. And I got a couple more. I alluded this earlier. Child's Play 2 was the first horror movie I ever watched. It's not the original. The original one is strictly a horror film. It's just a gnarly, straightforward horror film. Brad Dourif in this role. It's like he jumped into this role and took it and just ran with it. He is fantastic as the Chucky character. I can't imagine him being played by anybody else. Although the 2019 remake with Mark Hamill is pretty good. I enjoyed it a lot. But Brad Dourif in the second one in particular, I saw it on USA as a kid, scared the dog shit out of me. I was terrified of Chucky throughout the years. This movie in particular, I love little shits like in movies. I love it. Leprechaun, the original Leprechaun is fantastic. Trick or Treat from 2007 is fantastic with Sam. And this movie also came out the year I was born, so it just ties in with it. But Child's Play 2 legitimately terrified me. I have a loving relationship with that whole series of movies that came after that, every single one of them, up until this day with these series. Now, this movie was directed by John LaFia. Don Mancini is the creator, and he has worked on every single film as well as the series that's coming out on USA now, which is extremely well done. And Don Mancini's only directed, I believe, one movie out of the whole series, and it's just wild to me. Don't throw a blind eye towards the Child's Play series. It's fun. They're a lot of fun. You know, horror's about schlock sometimes. And Charles Lee Ray, Brad Dourif, Chucky in this movie, he is such a shithead. He is such like a terrible person in this role. I mean, there's a great line where he's telling somebody to park a car. He's telling the, I believe it's the teenage sister of Andy's in there to park a car, and he just goes, "Park this piece of shit." And it's just done with so much venom in his voice that it's great. Could recommend that movie more. And my final movie is a movie that Austin and I went and saw in theaters together. He had asked me to go to a movie with him, and when he presented it to me, I immediately like shit on it, was like, it's just going to be a Conjuring movie or one of those possession movies. I don't give a shit. He's like, come on, man, this one's weird. Like, let's go see it. So we went and saw it. And that would be 2018's Hereditary. Ari Aster directed. I arguably think it's his best film he's done. Midsummer's great. Beau is Afraid is something else. But this is, to me, a flawless horror film. It's made me think for 5 years. It's made me think every time I watch it. It's made me rethink any sort of concept I had about it. It's made me dig into it even further. Toni Collette in this movie should have got an Oscar and got screwed. This might be one of my favorite horror movies of all time. It's such a good movie. It's so visceral and guttural. It's very well filmed. Ari Aster does a great thing with trauma in any of his movies. I can't suggest this movie enough. I watch it every Halloween. It's a long watch, but man, you just blow right through it with one of my favorite scenes, if not my favorite scene, is when the mother is finally possessed. Yes. And she is hiding in the corner of the room, and she swims to the other corner and immediately like just chases him through the house, is banging her head against that attic door and is in there chopping her own head off with a piano wire.
Yeah.
That is like, I watched that movie in that theater on the edge of my seat.
Both this movie and Midsummer, we've seen both of those movies together in the theater, and I feel like I've had like audible reactions to both. Like, I think we saw Hereditary together. I think CJ may have been there, or maybe John or whoever.
I think it was just us, bud.
That could be it, but I just remember, there's so many scenes where I was just like, was in a theater full of people, probably. We like, oh God, like just audible, like just gut reaction.
Midsummer's that same way. But Midsummer's great, but that's more of a thinker in a sense of like, you really have to go like, oh, okay, that's what this is about. Whereas Hereditary is like, here's what it is. You're getting all of it right in the teeth. Now you get to go back and watch this multiple times and find all the hints. Whereas Midsummer is like very much a trauma movie, but it is also a breakup movie, and you get it almost from the get-go. Hereditary, arguably could be my favorite horror film of all time. If it's not, it's number 2. It's 1 and 2. You ask me a different day, I could say something else. Now, with all that, we've obviously picked different songs from different artists. We're going to create a playlist of this for anybody that wants to listen to these tracks. Austin, why don't you start us out?
So, we obviously picked a handful of movies. We also wanted to include a playlist of songs for this particular episode. Again, I kind of went in chronological order with this, but you really couldn't have a Halloween playlist in aggressive music or like heavy metal or whatever without having a Black Sabbath song. Into the Void was my pick. Maybe some of you would have picked the title track, Black Sabbath by Black Sabbath from Black Sabbath.
I almost did.
I think this riff in Into the Void is perhaps like just as eerie as that song, just as eerie as Children of the Grave, just as eerie as something like Hand of Doom. It's my favorite song to pick up a guitar and just play on, like that opening riff. When I look at the title of the song, it makes me feel like it's going to be some sort of like dark Lovecraftian sort of
there you go,
sci-fi thing, but it's not about any of those things at all. It's literally just about escaping Earth because it sucks so bad with pollution and war. They're let's just launch ourselves into space and see if we can find another place where perhaps things are better. Geezer. And I love it. So I would say that was the first pick. My next song is an album I discovered a handful of years back by a Texas-based singer-songwriter by the name of Rocky Erickson. He was originally in a band called the 13th Floor Elevators, and this kind of comes off of like he had left the band, or maybe I'm not exactly sure what the dynamics with that were, but he had like such a wild history of kind of in and out of like psych wards. Like he had gotten arrested in 1969 for like smoking a doobie, basically. Like he had like a joint in his possession and was arrested, and instead of taking a 10-year sentence, he pled insanity, and he was like in a psychiatric ward where he like had involuntary like electroshock therapy done to him and stuff like that. God. And then so he was finally released in 1972. And I think he was like writing poetry and music throughout this entire time that he was there. But this album in particular, The Evil One from 1981, has like a bunch of tracks that are like just B-movie heavy, basically. Like I picked a song called I Think of Demons. There's obviously songs like Night of the Vampire, I Walk with a Zombie. There's ghouls and ghosts and all sorts of stuff on this. I don't know if we'll talk about this in a future episode, but Chelsea Wolfe covered Night of the Vampire. Entombed also covered that song on a split for Earache in 1995. Really? Yeah. Damn. Ghost covered If You Have Ghosts on like an EP they did. I think these are all like very extremely well crafted songs. The guitar tone's great. There's like solos. His voice is awesome on it. It's rock and roll, but it's also psychedelic and very melodic, and it's very cool. So I would definitely recommend checking out anything by Rocky Erickson, but specifically this album in particular if you're getting in the holiday mood. My next song, jumping a couple years forward, I feel like you couldn't have Halloween as well without having a little bit of Merciful Fate, King Diamond. I picked a song called Nuns Have No Fun from perhaps their first release ever, self-titled EP from 82. I think this would later become available on a compilation they did with called The Beginning in 87. But I mean, everything from the artwork to the sound of this band has always been kind of satanic and very horror adjacent. So, I mean, I really probably could have picked any sort of Merciful Fate or King Diamond release, but I was feeling in the mood for Nuns Have No Fun. It kind of feels a little different from anything that they've done. It almost feels a little bit punkier to me in a lot of ways, this song in particular. But anyway, moving ahead, this debut release by this album in 1983 is like, there's just horror themes all over it. It's satanic. It's murderous. It's ruthless. It's very rudimentary as well, as far as a young band coming together to put out a debut record for Metal Blade in 83. It's Slayer's Show No Mercy. It was one of the first metal albums I ever bought. And I love so many songs on this album to this day. I learned how to play guitar basically just listening to this record. Die by the Sword is a great one. I think Tormentor is on, Black Magic's on this album as well. But one that really felt like perfect for the holiday season was Metal Storm, Face the Slayer. I mean, even the band's aesthetic at this time was pretty adjacent to, kind of
I always thought that was cool.
Classic heavy metal type.
Almost like first wave black metal.
Yeah. Studs, leather, Carrie's got
a little bit of eye makeup,
the nails, like wristband. If you've ever watched, there's a combat tour that occurred where
Exodus and Venom, right?
Exodus, Venom, and Slayer. Yeah. And so there's like interviews with the bands, there's with Venom at least. And then, they film the crowd, and it's I literally ripped off the YouTube video and had it on my iPod so I could watch it. And it was still in, it was still in parts like it was on YouTube. So I would like watch the part, go watch the second part. We already filmed this for a future episode, but this is a different Motorhead record, but we're going to be coming on a later record, but this comes off of I want to say this is a compilation. It's 84's No Remorse, Killed by Death. Great song. Love it. The band was like a 4-piece at this point, but it's kind of like being just classic Motorhead, I'm being a badass kind of track. And then there's also like in the bridge, it's very kind of ghoulish. Lemmy's putting on this kind of gravelly.
That's funny.
More gravelly. He's kind of like putting on a character. And in the video too, there's like they use like a effect of like green light on his face, like almost like he's telling a campfire story, and he's just like singing better. Everything. But great track. Kind of getting into death metal thrash territory on this next one.
Oh man, good pick.
Perhaps the first death metal record of all time. The debut record from Possessed, Seven Churches from 85.
I would agree with
Bay
you.
Area. Larry Lalonde of Future Primus fame. Just literally a bunch of kids that were still in high school got together and wrote a pretty groundbreaking album for the time. They also had kind of an aesthetic with like the sort of, if you've seen any of the old, I'm sure it's all in like Murder in the Front Row, that great book. But definitely had a look. They were trying to go for certainly a stage presence, but
absolutely,
I wanted to pick. This was maybe the first song I heard off the record. It's called Pentagram, and there's a intro in the beginning where all of the vocals are reversed, and it's literally just, I don't know who's doing it, but it's all of the names of each member, like they just saying all the names of each member reversed, and that's basically it. But
I think my first introduction to this band was I heard Cannibal Corpse do a cover of The Exorcist.
Yeah, also on the same album. So yeah,
Yep.
absolutely. Great band. Obviously you can check out some of the other stuff. I think they got back together later.
Yeah. The lead singer, Jeff Becerra, is obviously the only original member. He is obviously, he had an accident during I believe the early 90s where he was shot and paralyzed, but he's still out there and they're still putting out cool records. Yeah. I mean, they're signed Nuclear Blast. Like, they're still touring.
Great band. Love them. Maybe stepping away from the metal realm here. I think Swindle even picked the track, but I'm going to go with Ramones' Pet Cemetery from Brain Drain in 89. I am a huge Ramones fan. I always have been. It's like one of the most influential bands on my playing, like as far as like playing guitar or just listening to music in general. It like opened so many doors for me growing up. And to know that here's the thing. So they had, the computers open in school and some of the websites you could go on, maybe not all of them were blocked, but they had like Ramones.com basically or whatever. And you could watch videos and listen to music on the website. And so I would watch their music videos all the time, just like in study hall or whatever. And I just thought it was the coolest shit in the world. And so they had like the music video for Pet Cemetery, which almost seems like I Want to Be Sedated in a cemetery. It's just like a revolving cast of characters that are kind of in and out of frame while the band performs in a graveyard. They're like being buried. And Joey Ramone's hair almost seems like cobwebs. They're like, it's just like completely over his face.
It's a Dee Dee song, right? Dee Dee wrote the song.
He did. So the way, as I've read it, is that Stephen King was a huge fan of the Ramones. They played a show in New England and he invited them to come over after the show. And so Stephen King gave Dee Dee a copy of the book. He went downstairs and like in an hour or so time, he came back up and had the lyrics to the song. And so that's how it happened. And it ended up in the 1989 film adaptation as well. So it plays at the credits.
I just want to say that in present day internet existence, if someone told me to go to Ramones.com, I would never go to that website because I would be like, this is a phishing, like someone's sending me a phishing email. Go to the Ramones.com.
It's funny that he mentions that, like, I believe you could go to Yahoo Music when I was younger and you could watch like music videos from different artists. I sadly saw a 6 Feet Under video that way. But moving forward.
We are from 1989. We are jumping way ahead into the future to 2013. I was like maybe in Bowling Green for like a handful of months at this point. And I remember when this came out, big fan of Decibel Magazine, as we've mentioned on this show many, many times. Yep. But this band made the cover and they had just released their, I want to say, third record. Is this their third?
Yes, I believe this is their
Sister
third.
By In Solitude. And like some of the records before this are fine, but for whatever reason, I don't know what it was, something going on in Sweden at the time. Sister is like a perfect record, and it is like truly reminiscent of all the things I love about horror. And I mean, there somebody actually played the song Death Knows Where for somebody the other day, and they were like, man, that's just like Scooby-Doo music. That just sounds like the Scooby-Doo walk-in music. I was like, I mean, I guess so, but kind of like more traditional. It feels very analog, I guess you would say. Everything is very warm sounding.
Definitely that like Blue Oyster Cult kind of like early heavy music kind of vibe, like very sparse production. You can still hear every instrument. Nothing's too thick. But that band has a vibe, for sure. I believe in that interview in that Decibel article, they would bury their stage clothes underground and then they'd put them on or something like that.
They just do the Dead Mayhem thing.
I love it. Yeah.
Okay.
I think that's what they did.
That's funny. I mean, it makes sense in a lot of ways. Like the music videos, all the visual elements of this band are very occult-like, very Halloween-esque. So if you're looking for like maybe a more contemporary record, I would say that this is a great route to go. I only have a
We
couple.
will be talking about that record in the future for sure.
Absolutely. I only have a couple left, but this is a duo that was formed out of another band called Marriages, which featured Emma Ruth Rundle and this drummer. The drummer went off and he wanted to basically start a project where he was doing all of the instrumentation, from guitar to like programming. It's very electronic based. I am of course talking about Drab Majesty, which is now more or less a duo, but it sounds like new wave, kind of sounds like Depeche Mode kind of stuff. But I always loved a lot of horror because of their kind of synth based, we talked about John Carpenter earlier. I feel like there is a lot of like synth based instrumentation or electronic instrumentation and, a lot of 80s horror and stuff like that. So the Cold Souls kind of feels like it could be in a movie like that, like an older flick. Maybe it's also, their stage aesthetic is like based on an old cult from California. I don't know the name of it, but it's like very futuristic and, they have these big long cloaks. So it almost seems like it would be.
Oh, you mean Scientology?
No, there's, I wish I could be like, yeah, it's funny. But like literally there's like, I forget the name of the cult and I wish I had looked that up, but
Zoltan.
Yeah. So check out Cold Souls, Drab Majesty from the Demonstration 2017. My last song literally came out last year. This is a band based out of Florida. It's death metal, but also so much more than that. This was like a mini LP that came out on $20 Spin called Blue Nothing. Shadowside Kingdom is like one of the songs on this, but you should really kind of listen to it as a full piece. It's death metal. It's some of the most unique guitar playing I've heard in a band in a long time. But it's also very atmospheric, and there's like, it almost feels like you're in a dungeon and there's like chains like shaking up against like, stone walls, and it's very classic and medieval almost sounding in a lot of ways. To me, it would work very well in something like Sleepy Hollow or something like that. I don't know. There's just something about it that gives off a very kind of occult, very eerie vibe for sure that would work well to kind of round out my playlist.
Starting off my list, I picked Shame on the Night by Dio from Holy Diver, which we've covered in the past. But obviously Dio, a lot of his songs, like any number of songs could be used for a Halloween playlist. I chose this one because, it starts with the werewolf howling, and the riff is kind of like the whole vibe of the song. In the first half, it's like kind of quarter notes. There's a lot of space for like eeriness, and the lyrics are like about how night is going to take over day and we're just going to be cast into darkness. And the last riff of the song is big and kind of doomy, and there's chants that go along with it. And it seems spooky. My second pick, Mr. Crowley by Ozzy Osbourne from
Fucking great song.
Blizzard of Oz. Also, much like Dio, any number of Ozzy Osbourne songs could be picked. Diary of a Madman, Howl at the Moon, anything. Just name it. Name an Ozzy Osbourne song. But this song starts off with some keyboards and organ that are heavy, kind of remind me of Nosferatu soundtrack. But the verse riff, especially to me, is sinister sounding, I would say. And the lyrics, of course, are about the famous occultist Aleister Crowley. Dylan, anything you want to say about that?
Crowley was a heathen. Crowley was, that's the easiest way to describe it. He was a heathen. He was a deviant, a madman. He was a madman man. Great song. My
favorite lyric of the song is in I think it's the second verse, where he says, Mr. Crowley, would you ride my white horse? And then he says, Mr. Crowley, I'm being metaphoric, of course, or something like that. And I was like, thanks, Ozzy. Like, we didn't get it before
The
that.
Ozman's pretty straightforward, this message.
Oh, he had to do it.
All right. Number 3, kind of surprisingly, even to me, I'm going to go with Bring Me Darkness by Black Tusk off of Set the Dial. Dylan and I saw this band pretty shortly after this album came out.
Where at?
The end.
Oh, shit. Okay.
That was actually supposed to be on that show, and that's why I wanted to go, but they didn't play.
Because it wasn't all ages.
Right. But Troy Saunders' brother...
Monstro was the band.
Yeah. His brother from Blood Simple played that show. But that song, just kind of like a little bit of a straightforward heavy metal song. Black Tusk is from Georgia, and they sound like it. They sound like Baroness and Mastodon and Kylesa, but they're just
a little punkier,
more straightforward. Yeah. And the lyrics are just like general devil worshipping shit, like sacrificing virgins, and there's lines about darkness and murder.
Is that the 666 chant?
Yes, the song is the second song on the album, but the first song is an intro. So literally the first lyrics are 6, 6, 6. Good song. For number 4, Hangar 18 by Megadeth.
Okay, going sci-fi.
Yeah, they have a few songs that are kind of horror themed. Most of the other ones are about like occult, also kind of the song Five Magics or The Conjuring are like, about like doing magic shit. But this one's about aliens and like kind of knowing stuff that you're not supposed to know about aliens and UFOs. It's mostly just a solo fest, right?
Yeah, it's a wank fest.
It's literally just dudes throwing it back to one another, which I'm all about. You know, if it's great, it works very well. I mean,
that Mustaine sure can write a song.
That riff, starting about 3 minutes in, I really like that riff. So number 5, I just kind of had to pick an integrity song. I picked Tempest from Those Who Fear Tomorrow, arguably the best integrity album, but
agreed.
They kind of generally have a horror vibe. Like the start of this album is, I think, a Charles Manson sample. And like their most recent album is just a whole album about werewolves and a bunch of stuff in between here and there, devil lyrics. Kind of the first verse of the song has like Dwid's double layer vocals, and it sounds a demon is speaking. It's a really fast, heavy, pummeling song. And the end, they just slow it up and make it real big. So it's a good end to that song. Number 6, I kind of went with an easy one for me. Fall Children by AFI off of the All Hallows EP. Kind of invoking maybe a little Ray Bradbury imagery. There's a song literally called Halloween, but I didn't want to go with like, it's a little too easy. but fast, punk, a lot of power chords, a lot of octave chords.
Great vocals.
And this was kind of the start of AFI's like darker image that led into like Sing the Sorrow and all the other stuff. And the ending of the song is like a music box playing after it's been twisted. So, that shit's eerie. Number 7, from My Fair City of Louisville, Kentucky, Nosferatu Man by Slint from the album Spiderland, which is not about vampires probably, but Slint is just in general, their music is kind of discordant and eerie, brooding, slow. The lead guitar part on parts of the song are like probably not even in key, and they're not hard to play, but it definitely lends to an eerie vibe.
Yeah, that band during that era always made me think of like a certain era of Neurosis, like very early on. Some of like before Through Silver and Blood, when they were still on Alternative Tentacles, made me think of like that dissonance and that eerie vibe with some of the guitar tones and everything. I know these were just like teenage kids like coming up with this wild music. But it definitely invokes a vibe for sure.
Maybe fair to mention too, Louisville, was it the bass player who literally had like a movie store, basically like an old videotape shop that you could go to.
Wild and Woolly Video. That's I got the abominable Dr. Fives and Dr. Five Strikes Again cool. DVD I got from Wild and Woolly Video.
Yeah, that was great. It's just like a weird connect. I've only been there. I was only able to go there the one time while it was open, but I mean, it had like the pinball machine and like just the wall covered in these tapes you'd never heard of before, or at least I never heard. This is kind of an aside, but Shirt Killer, the site that sells like Thou merch and other bands, they legitimately still have Wild and Woolly Video merch on the website, and they have Slint merch. They have like wild Louisville bands from the early 2000s merch still up on the website. That's crazy. I had no idea. There's
probably a connection there.
I'm sure like that dude originally did the screen printing for them, and he just has like the screens for all that shit and can just make one shirt at a time. Yeah. Also, a thing to mention about that song is there's a reference to Ramblin' Man by Hank Williams in Nosferatu.
Damn, hell yeah.
Hey.
All right. They're down with Senior.
Moving right along to number 8, Among the Living by Anthrax.
Sure.
From Among the Living.
There we go.
Which is about The Stand by Stephen King.
Did not know that.
I think there's a different song on that album that is about a different Stephen King story. And they have like songs like Madhouse, and so any number of Anthrax songs. The lyrics are kind of like about a post-apocalyptic cult leader, which, yeah, seems like some Stephen King. The guitar riff going into the song, pretty creepy. Their like chorus riff is kind of chromatic, so it's a little eerie, creepy too. And the breakdown riff, great. Halftime breakdown, love that. And there's a chant at the end of that song too. Number 9, by the Beatles, Revolution. No, I'm just kidding.
That would be a good curveball, wouldn't it?
Similar to Austin, I chose a Ramones song, You Should Have Never Opened That Door, from the album Leave Home. It's the last song, which is literally about them watching horror movies and just being like, you shouldn't have opened that door, you idiot.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah, it's the lyrics are like, you shouldn't have opened that door and now you're dead. And my last song is Machete Twins by Pig Destroyer from the album Phantom Limb. Any number of Pig Destroyer songs are about kind of a side of horror that I don't love, and it's like just grotesque violence for the sake of violence. And I kind of introduced Austin to Jennifer by Pig Destroyer from the album Prowler in the Yard last night.
Sure did.
That is a gross album in general. It's that cover art is horrifying.
Disgusting. Yeah.
J.R. Hayes has a way with lyrics.
Yeah. After we watched Terrifier 2, Austin said something about art, and it just reminded me, like, this is art. And I was like, oh, no.
Perfect.
No. But Machete Twins, the song starts off with, like, a weird rhythm drum intro. It's kind of, like, off-kilter and just, like, throws you off. But then once everybody comes in, it's just pummeling and, like, double bass going at it, and it's grindcore. It just grinds you into paste.
So I've got 10 illustrious tracks here. So starting out, I'm going to go with the trope. We haven't mentioned them yet. I got to bring up the Misfits. You can't have Halloween. You can't have October without listening to the Misfits. This was a hard one for me. I chose Halloween and Halloween 2. And I would say these songs evoke Halloween to me. The lyrics, the feel of them. Halloween 1 is very straightforward, just a good like old school punk rock track. whereas Halloween 2 is a little bit more kind of atmospheric. I would say an honorable mention would be listen to Sam Hain's version of Halloween, or Samhain as it's actually pronounced. No one's going to pronounce it that way. They never will. But I will say this, the Ramones created punk rock. You wouldn't have the Misfits without the Ramones. I'm a big Misfits fan. I prefer the Misfits over the Ramones.
Fair enough. Honestly, I left them off of my list because I figured one of more or less you would pick them, or either that or Danzig.
You know, I thought about Danzig, but I went, you know what? That's not as much Halloween to me as much as like it evokes a vibe for sure. He's got this evil vibe, but I was like, I don't think of him when I think of Halloween.
I'm gonna watch like the Aqua Teen episode probably.
That's so good.
Tonight.
Can you make the blood flow up the walls?
I don't see why not.
My favorite Danzig thing is when Henry Rollins had to sign copies of Henry and Glenn Forever. He's like, Glenn is gonna hate this. And I have that full thing, and I love it. I think it's so perfect and funny.
What a series.
My next track is Ghost Ritual from their debut album Opus Eponymous.
I knew this was coming. Easily.
That came out on Rise Above Records, which is a subsidiary to Metal Blade Records. So this was their first record. Very sparse recorded. Almost sounds like a demo. Fenris from Dark Throne was a big champion of this band's demo, and really kind of got their name out there. And I mean, this was when I heard this, it was kind of changing for me. It was like classic rock, recorded in like a 60s kind of vibe. It definitely has that old school like Scooby-Doo thing going on to it. The artwork is a tribute to Salem's Lot, which is a terrifying vampire.
If you start that movie right now, you'll finish it tomorrow. And
dude, you aren't kidding. That is a long movie. It's a miniseries.
The first video that came out, I mean, from the moment you watch him like lurk out on that kind of like that 60s set for I forget what track it is, but you knew this band was going to be something. And obviously they're as close to an arena. I mean, they are an arena band. The last I didn't get to. We came in too late, but I've seen Iron Maiden on a tour where Ghost opened. I should say we saw Ghost at the Marathon.
They were on tour for their 2015 record, I believe. And it's funny to think like Marathon's like a 1,500 seat venue, maybe a little bit more. And they're an arena band. They're playing arenas. Never would have thought. We knew they were going to be something because of the type of vibe that they evoked. And let's face it, the guys write good songs. You know, they're catchy, they're earworms. I mean, they're equal parts ABBA, equal parts like Merciful Fate. Good vibe, definitely Halloween vibe. I like the whole like different kind of cardinal or different like priest for each album is the singer. I love it. I love the hokiness about this band with their t-shirt designs and the different horror albums that they're adjacent to. All the artwork is a different movie trope. I mean, they released an EP that has, it might have even been called If You Have Ghost, but it's the Nosferatu on the boat. And it's so perfect. Like I heard this album when it came out. I bought it on a whim, saw the cover. It's like, that's Salem's Lot. I got to have this. I bought that and a Electric Wizard album that came out the same day. And I forgot all about that Electric Wizard record. Not to say it was bad, just not as memorable as Dope Throne. But Ghost, if you're not familiar with the first record, check it out because it's a classic at this point. Again, we're going to go with a kind of a personal favorite I know between you and Austin, and I introduced you to this band pretty hard on a trip close to Halloween a handful of years ago. I'm going to go with Typo Negative. This band has seen a huge resurgence in the metal and hardcore scene within the last decade and has become a classic band. I'm actually going to go with the track Wolf Moon from October Rust that has I'm not going to disclose what the song is about because it's very despicable. It's essentially a vampire for a certain time of month for certain things. And it's a great song, has everything that I would think a Typo song should have. Vocal layering, big lush guitar sounds, bass tones that are just erupting. Typo is like Black Sabbath meets the Beatles to me. great lush vocals, baritone. That baritone sound is something you're always going to remember.
I mean, what's so funny? You said Beatles and Sabbath. They've literally covered both in many ways. I know they had to do a medley for the Beatles cover, but they
covered Black Sabbath. They covered the title track and did different lyrics from the perspective of Satan on it. And I love this band. I love everything about it. I could have picked many typo tracks that would have represented the Halloween period.
Absolutely.
I will say honorable mention just for the sake. It's probably everybody's introduction to the typo is Black Number One. You can't beat it. It's a classic song by this point. But Wolf Moon, if you haven't listened to October Rust, it's in the title. October Rust. Listen to it. It's probably the most romantic album that they've ever done. When I think of Halloween with this band, it's Bloody Kisses, October Rust, and World Coming Down. Those are the 3 albums that tie together with that whole like October vibe. Next is a band that you and I saw a couple years ago, Austin, around October, Cradle of Filth.
Yeah.
We got to see them. So Cradle of Filth is like, I could have chosen a lot of black metal bands, but October doesn't make me think about black metal in general. That's kind of a winter thing for me. Seeing like the moon shine through like the really sparsely dead trees and kind of that weird ring you get around the moon when it's about the snow.
Is it more of like the symphonic elements to this band that like give you the horror vibe, I guess?
So with this band has a lot of tie-ins with Hammer Horror. They're British as well. So they've used a lot of horror stuff in their albums. Like they had Doug Bradley from Hellraiser fame do a ton of their like spoken word stuff on their albums. They tried to get the guy from Candyman and he never got back to him. So they're like, hey, Doug's a British guy. Let's get him on here. They have a vibe to them too that definitely makes me think of like more horror adjacent stuff. Danny Filth was in a horror movie that he directed years ago. The title slips me. And like the guy definitely has a sense of humor because like he's in a band, that plays the type of music they play. It's essentially arena black metal to me. It's more akin to maybe Iron Maiden, honestly, in a sense, than maybe traditional black metal. Like they've gotten away from it. There's definitely some power metal vibes to it for sure. But the track I chose was Medusa and Hemlock. That might have been the very first track I heard from this band. It is on their 2004 album Nymphetamine. I also want to say that you could listen to the track Nymphetamine from that album, which is they're probably their biggest hit. Great band, fun live band, fun kind of vibe to it. They don't take themselves as seriously as a lot of the other black metal bands do. These guys just have a fun vibe to it. And they have done Misfits covers and you name it. So it definitely fits the Halloween vibe with it. I'm going to step into this. You mentioned Merciful Fate earlier. I got to mention Merciful Fate. I chose Evil off of Melissa.
First song I ever heard.
Great,
so
yep, has that great riff. I was born in the cemetery. Like that whole thing just makes me lose it every time. Obviously, I can thank Metallica for that medley they did on Garage Inc. for this album, for this track. And the Melissa album is a personal favorite of mine. I love Don't Break the Oath, but Melissa, just like, I always go back to it a little bit more. And that band, you can't have Halloween, like you said, without Merciful Fate, King Diamond. The lyrics, the imagery, just the vibe. Light some candles, put on Melissa. And then we go forward a little bit, and my next track is this is a really terrifying band to me, even to this day, when I know more about like what musical, what goes into music, how you make it, like what creates a vibe and all of that. But Portal's Swarth.
This was an interesting pick. I get it. It's they're Australian.
They're something like that. New Zealand, Australian. This band, when I listen to it, makes me feel like I am falling into a Lovecraftian hellscape. It is just a wall of just like, it feels like you're in one of Dante's levels of hell, to me. And this era was when they were wearing the big clock mask and the clock stuff. And it's terrifying. It literally looks like a Del Toro kind of like scene. A terrifying band. I mean, it's black metal. It's death metal to an extent, but it's pretty like almost dissonant. Like it's very much a wash of sound that is just really uncomfortable to listen to, but is so fun to listen to.
Did y'all? I don't know why I just thought of this. I just like one, that poor bastard having to carry around that clock on his head.
Oh God.
Two, going to Halloween stores is also obviously like pretty tight. Just perusing. But did you guys ever like the back wall of like a Halloween store with like all of those crazy fucking masks? And like,
Of course.
there'd be like ridiculously like detailed like killer clowns from outer space, you know, like I just always wonder like who is getting these for one and like carrying
This guy.
this guy.
You know, I remember this is going to be the first like cold Halloween Tennessee's had in quite some time. And I was like talking to somebody at work. I said, man, do you remember like growing up, like how hot it would be in Halloween? And like you'd have that plastic costume on, that mask, and it would just fuse to your body. And you're like, I'm done. Candy's, yeah, I don't want it. This sucks.
I don't think Dylan was in a band with this person, but he was in Forefathers with all the rest of the people that were in Forefathers were in a band with this person named Shane that like gets really, really detailed.
Oh, cosplay stuff.
Stuff. Like very,
Really?
like he has really nice like Batman costumes and like, I don't know all of them, but I see some of them. But people that are into really expensive cosplay would do shit like that.
Absolutely.
Kind of what we're talking about through this thing. If you're like really into shit, you know, like I buy records. Everybody's got their thing. Swindle, I have to ask you, what was do you remember the first thing you went as to Halloween as, or like a thing that do you remember the first time you dressed up? Like what was like maybe a costume you chose where like, oh, I'm going to be that this year?
I don't remember this, but I have pictures of me very small as like a shitty vampire, and I just like had a black t-shirt turned inside out, and like
what? Wait, what does that mean?
It probably had a logo on it, and he flipped it inside out, so it was just straight black.
Yeah, in the picture, I could still see the logo. It was a Dick Tracy, like it looked like the comic book Dick Tracy.
That's perfect.
Shirt turned inside out, and I think I had a cape, but I had like white face makeup and like red face makeup under where my beard was.
Perfect.
Amazing.
But the first thing I can distinctly remember dressing up as was a Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle.
Badass. Dude, those old costumes were great. I remember so many of them.
I had one too.
Dylan, I'm going to ask you the same question.
Oh my God. So the first thing I remember was a Ninja Turtle. I was Raphael. But my most memorable childhood costume will always be, I was 4 years old. I didn't have a costume. I went to my mom. I was like, what am I going to be for Halloween? I was Walker, Texas Ranger. Cowboy hat, drawn on beard. I was Texas Ranger.
Tell me you're from the South without telling me.
I'm sure there are photos around. If I can find a photo, you guys will see it.
I'll pop it in here. I know I can find this one because I post it every year. But my most classic photo of me as a like my Halloween where I'm like, all right, I know I want to be something, was a Game Boy. I don't know why. Good. I had like a blue Game Boy Color growing up. That was like the first video game type thing that I ever had. And so I was like, this was like the 8th grade. Or no, not the 8th grade. Sorry. This was like the 3rd grade. I was 8 years old. I didn't know how I was going to be a Game Boy, but we found like a big box basically. And we cut holes in the sides for my arms and for my head to pop out. In the photo, I think I'm wearing like Adidas like sweatshorts, and like it just and I put Yu-Gi-Oh was big at the time. I think I had a poster. I cut the Yu-Gi-Oh thing and just slapped it on the front. I fell. We had like a parade as like a kid, and because you couldn't like you didn't have full mobility in that thing, so I remember I just caught a rock or something and I couldn't catch myself because my legs didn't move all the way and just completely ate it on like the front of this thing. And kids had to like pick my arms up and help me up and then like prop me up.
No.
It was pretty great. But
He's dead. Austin, finish off Dylan's list. He can't finish it. He's dead.
before we start one more time, my favorite thing that I've ever been in my entire life has been being one iteration of Count Dankula, the weed vampire.
God.
Started by our good friend Coach, then succeeded by our good friend Angela, and then I took on the role of the
Because they bit you.
the weed. Yeah, they they blew smoke in my face, and then
I will say, in my adult life, the favorite thing I've ever done, costume wise, was the Stone Cold Steve Austin costume that I did. That is
What a year.
That is one of my favorite things I've ever done on Halloween. That was so good. That was right around the time I started shaving my head too.
Oh, yeah.
That was one of my favorite things, and those photos are always fun to go back and look at.
I mean, yeah, just that I can't believe we haven't talked about it yet, but yeah, like perhaps our best moment, Halloween moment, or one of my favorite Halloween moment, playing a cover Halloween set at my house. Did we play any of the songs that ended up on this list?
We played Misfits and fucking Ramones.
None of these. Nope.
TSOL.
Yeah. We did. It was punk covers.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I dressed up as a witch. We had a friend that worked at Ulta and like legit did my makeup, and that was.
I still have that picture.
Dude,
of
those
your
are
leg
great.
hiked
That's
up.
a great photo.
Go ahead and send it. We'll pop it in here.
I loved doing, even the year we didn't end up playing, just learning those covers. I love doing that. Dylan, to this day, fucking hates just the idea. Like, one of our friends was like, it was Matt, was like, Swindle, we should be in a Halloween cover band. And Dylan, one of our days that we were eating Soul Azteca, and Franklin was like, I do not want to do that. Like, hopefully Matt just drops this.
I was bummed.
like,
We tried to do it that second time, and we just like forgot that we had to like actually book a show or something.
Yeah, it would.
y'all also, that weekend was when y'all saw fucking Cattle Decap. That's why we didn't get any shows, because y'all.
Oh
went
yeah,
and saw Cattle
we're
Decap.
gonna eat the blame for that one for sure.
But also, though, those shows were booked like months in advance.
Oh my god, they were booked in like June.
We couldn't play like any of the places in Bowling Green on Halloween
So
night.
I'm gonna put this out there, Swindle. For next year, I would absolutely do it again. But you and I have to curate the songs.
I would do it.
Okay.
Also,
I would have to curate the songs, or all three of us. We curate the songs.
I drive down.
Let's put it out there right now. We curate the songs. I don't care if it's a Chicago show. I don't care if it's a Bowling Green show.
It'd probably have to be Bowling Green.
Yeah, we curate the songs.
We ain't getting a show in Chicago.
We keep it real simple, like, punk songs, do a Motorhead song, whatever it is, do something fun that it doesn't take a whole lot of like, initiative to do it. Maybe we get Ethan. Let's reach out to Ethan Whitty.
Yeah. Well, Ethan played drums last time.
Yeah. Let's reach out to him, put him behind a microphone. Have him do it. And yeah, let's will it. Let's start talking about that.
All right. Let's do it. Anyway.
You heard it here first.
Dylan.
Dylan,
what's your
continue
next?
with your list.
After going off on that
we went from Portal to what's your favorite Halloween costume to already putting something in motion. So another Sweden tie-in here. Austin had In Solitude. I chose Tribulation, who we've talked about on our podcast before, but I chose a track from their most recent album, where the gloom becomes the sound, and the track is called Hour of the Wolf, which was one of the singles. Such a good song, has a great arpeggiated intro to it. You get the vibe of the band in the song. It's this very blackened, almost Lemmy-esque vocal that's sung over it. These great kind of traditional rock and roll kind of vibe. Like, it's a blackened rock and roll band to me. Just really great, hooky song, evokes the vibe of Halloween. Generally, anything from Sweden that's kind of dark like that is always going to be a lot of fun. Ghost being one that I mentioned before. But I will say, honorable mention, listen to the whole Down Below album, which we've talked about in a prior episode. Great band. You can always put this on around Halloween. Next track is kind of an outlier, I think, in general for everybody. I am a big fan of kind of mid 2000s metalcore from like 2002 to like 2006. And this band in particular was a huge influence on me. Good gateway band for me to get into death metal. Good gateway band for me to get in like the Misfits and all sorts of like dark rock like that, like AFI. Bleeding Through. And I chose a track from their 2006 album, The Truth. And I chose a song called Kill to Believe, and it's extremely aggressive. Yeah, it's got like big pop choruses to it, but it's extremely aggressive for metalcore at the time. And the tie-in is that this video for the song Kill to Believe and the video for the song Love in Slow Motion are connected. They're like a horror movie. It's kind of got the vibe of the 2003 Texas Chainsaw Massacre. And some of those movies like that has that really gross kind of dirty vibe. But another tie-in for this is that the album artwork for this album and the insert to it has like, it all shows these black and white photos that have been altered to make it look like they've had their faces pulled apart, ripped apart by a bear, like some sort of animal.
God
it's
damn.
grotesque. It's beautiful. It's very well done and beautiful. And this album is a great
This is art.
metalcore. Yeah, it's this art.
No
It's a
wonder
great
this guy
metalcore.
loved Terrifier too.
Like, it's a great metalcore record. It was actually produced by Rob Caggiano, who
Oh,
was
really?
in Anthrax. Yeah, it
Anthrax
definitely
and Volbeat.
Volbeat.
No
it
longer
actually
Volbeat,
helped-
but yeah.
No longer. Yeah, it helped me get into like Cradle of Filth because this band uses a lot of synths in that vibe as well. I hope we talk about that record at some point because that was a big deal for me. Hyper aggressive, like crazy entombed kind of guitar sounds that are on it. Fucking nuts. And my next one, I would be really disheartened if I didn't mention this band. It's fucking Halloween. It's horror. They may not be a Halloween band. Cannibal Corpse. I mean, come on. I mean, if there's, I'm repping them right now. My girlfriend bought me this shirt, and I'm so happy she did. She knows me.
Which I don't even see it. What's the?
I don't know what the design is, but she found it, and it's just like a really cool design with like almost like a Crypt Keeper-esque character on it. But I chose a song from their album Gore Obsessed from 2002 called Pit of Zombies. I mean, none more fitting for horror. You look at this band's catalog, it's horror adjacent. Every single thing. I got to see them play this song recently. It went over like just a bulldozer. This band is just known for being the riff masters that they are.
A Dilbozer.
Yes. A Dilbo. Oh my God. The Dilbozer. Detached retinas. They knew who to call in. The Dilbozer. You the man, Ricky. You the man. But this is a really great band. I think that doesn't get brought up for horror. They're kind of masters of it. I think Rob Barrett in an interview said Cannibal is best described as like coming up with more creative ways to kill when it comes to writing their songs. So like, oh yeah, I get it. Gore Obsessed is kind of a unknown album from them. It's not Kill, it's not The Wretched Spawn, it's not Bloodthirst. But it's a really fun fucking record, and you could listen to anything in their catalog again and get the whole vibe of Halloween, especially for into like slasher films and stuff like that. My last pick is I think has to be said, one of the saddest and most depressing country artists of all time. The man has never written a happy song. Even if you look at his upbeat songs, there's something bleak about them, and it kind of fits the time of year.
Setting the Woods on Fire. Pretty happy song.
Yeah, to an extent. Then you're setting shit on fire, right?
Austin, it's setting plants on fire.
It's a
There's
cover
nothing
up.
happy about setting trees on
It's just
fire.
about. It's just about.
Listen.
It's about eating chili with your best gal.
Listen, you two nerds. There's not a happy song this man has ever written. Even Call Elijah. It's not happy. He didn't get a kiss. So even jambalaya is not happy. I mean, you know what happens after you eat too much jambalaya? We all know, huh? Bert's Revenge.
We know what happens when Austin eats too much jambalaya.
Am I being called out?
But
on my own show with my best friends in the whole world? Just kidding.
Listen at him. Acting like we all don't blow the roof out when we like just bah.
That's
like we all do it.
That's the real horror. of this
there's
episode.
there is
That's the real terror of
there's a
Halloween.
there are so many stories that all of us have about things like this that we could even create our own episode about, but we're not. Someone's graduation. That's all I'm saying. But Hank Williams, the original, Alone and Forsaken, which got used in the most recent Last of Us series. This is a very dark, dank, depressing song. Definitely fits the kind of like autumn air kind of vibe to me. The leaves are dying, the grass is dying, it's getting colder. It's there. Hank Williams should fit in with like good folk horror. I think it fits in with like the American Gothic kind of theme. It's definitely got a vibe to it.
We were driving to go see that Full of Hell cattle decapitation show. We listened to Typo Negative, but we also, as many of our drives, and this kind of started with you guys going to shows. I remember, obviously it was October, it was nearing Halloween. I remember listening to this song in particular and driving down one of the parkways or one of the the highways in Kentucky, and you're going through like just kind of a patch of woods and everything is dead, and you're listening to this song and it's quiet in the car. You're just kind of letting the song go, and it was so bleak and very like, oh yeah, all right.
Yeah, that stretch between Cincinnati and Louisville especially is just dark, especially at night. And it seems there's nothing in between there. It seems like forever.
But also we got Waffle House after, so it wasn't too bad.
So no, you're getting that confused with that was the Cannibal show that you and I went to in Memphis.
No, we went to Waffle House after Full Hell.
Did we?
Oh yeah. Oh,
are we sure? There's been a lot of these.
Yeah. Oh, I got Waffle House after that.
So
I remember.
My first introduction to listening to like Hank Sr. and like really getting it, Swindle and I went and saw Crowbar at a Louisville venue called the Phoenix Hill Tavern that no longer exists. And on the way up there, I'm sure we listened to like In Utero and just kind of went through our normal thing. And then on the way back, he just puts on like Hank Sr. and it's this whole Ultimate collection. And it's like, oh, I have to hear everything on this. And it just started from there. That's kind of a tradition with all of us now. That's what we listen to on the way back from a show. Mm-hmm. When I worked at a convenience store in the year of 2013, I worked third shift. I was there alone for like 8 to 10 hours a night. I would play the Ultimate collection in its whole cycle. And people would go like, you all right, bud? Like, you okay? Like these older guys would come in like, you're all right? You doing okay? Like you need anything?
Like, I'm working third shift at a gas station. What do you think?
Hey man, yeah, you got 20 on pump 6. You're good.
There is something about the South where if you play Hank Sr. from the hours of like midnight to 3 around people, they're gonna check on you. I fueled there's the Waffle House in one of the Waffle Houses in Bowling Green, Kentucky. And I think we ended up there at like really late at night, and I put in a Hank Williams song, and somebody in the booth behind me was like, oh, who's playing this stuff? And I'm like, oh, it's me, man. He's like, oh, this is great. You're not in your feelings though, are you? And I was like,
my God. Is your buddy okay? We did it. This is our Halloween episode. Thank you guys for kind of joining in on this. I know this was a something we really wanted to do and really wanted to dig into it. So thank you guys for coming on. We'll be back with our regular show next week.
If you want to listen to any of the songs that we talked about, they're going to be available below for you to enjoy. Happy Halloween, Dill. Happy Halloween, Swindle. We'll be back next week talking about more riffs here on Riff Worship. Bye.